Welcome to the shit show. All right, Sean. So, you want to introduce the topics?
All right, it looks like today we've got Ukraine, Russia, Azov commanders, and cluster munitions. That's going to be fun.
A little Russia
We'll turn
update.
into economic disaster that is coming right over the hill, and then we'll discuss the sound of freedom and the pedophiles that are, I guess, running our country.
Ah, yes, the fall coming this autumn.
Yes,
All
coming
right.
to a town near you soon. It's going to be a fun one.
So,
So
I don't know as
Ukraine,
much about the Azov commanders stuff. I heard they were being, sent back to Ukraine. I didn't hear much about Russia's response, Russia's involvement, or even that much around the initial deal.
yeah. So my understanding on it is that whenever the Mariupol breakdown happened with Azov, that part of them surrendering to Russia was that they had negotiated a deal through Turkey that these guys would go to Turkey to stay there and be on house arrest until the end of the war and or the cessation of conflict, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And based on that, they were going to just they were going to be there, and that way they didn't go to a Russian prison and maybe not have something bad happen to them, whatever. I don't know. But it looks like that Turkey negotiated a deal with Ukraine, and I'm sure that our government had some pressure in there to push them to move
I
these
mean,
people. I'm
there's
not saying
been
they did. I'm just saying,
well, I mean,
yeah,
I know there's been a lot of stuff with NATO around Turkey, and I know NATO's been upset with Turkey not playing ball with the typical NATO line on things, and Turkey's never really been like the full partner, but they need to control that strait, so it's a
it's a love-hate relationship.
yeah, it's a bit tense. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was like you need to play ball or we're going to have problems and we'll I don't know what kind of punishment that they can enact on Turkey, but they'll come up with something.
Yeah, so either way, and there's a lot of theories around why this may have happened. So part of that deal was that Turkey negotiated that, um, and you know basically it seems like that Russia came out and said that they didn't know anything about it, and so they kind of had egg on their face, and they kind of just upset, felt like they'd been betrayed. Um, and I think part of it, there's a lot of theories on why this could have happened with regards to like the wheat deal that was supposed to be going through, and Russia was supposed to be able to export wheat, and that hasn't really happened. And so it's a cluster. I don't think it's much of anything, but it is what it is. Um, but speaking of cluster,
Oh, I
our,
knew you were. I don't know.
our
I thought it was more like this just seemed more in line with like
our Pentagon decided that it's okay to send cluster munitions to Ukraine because, get this, we're out of ammunition. And I don't know that we're out of ammunition as much as we just
we
don't
need
have
some for
excess to
ourselves.
send. Right. But like the artillery, the 155 millimeter artillery shells that Ukraine needs to be able to fire out of the howitzers that we gave them, everybody's short on. We've begged, borrowed, and stolen from whoever and wherever we can, and we just can't manufacture it. And turns out these cluster munitions actually are a replacement 155 millimeter shell, so they can use them in that artillery. So we can at least send them something. Uh, Problem is that in '09, as part of the omnibus bill, Senate put in there and Barack Obama signed into law that the U.S. cannot export any cluster munitions with a failure rate for the sub explosions, the bomblets, if you will, of greater than 1%, a dud rate of greater than 1%. And from my understanding, basically everybody kind of agrees that the failure rate's much higher, could be up to like close to 30%, which is scary.
But are you saying that this administration would lie about statistics?
I mean, no, and definitely I mean, they wouldn't lie about anything. They definitely wouldn't try to change the rules as they go or show special favors to anyone. Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have you address that in the economics section again, because those numbers are
which
lying.
part? The fact that they found cocaine in the White House, which was originally like somewhere, who knows where, out in the middle of the parking lot. Now, then it was, oh, well, it was in a lobby area where people dropped their phones. Then it was like maybe it was in the library, but that's still kind of a public area. And so now it was like right outside the situation room, which actually means that you had to either pass through or bypass security. And the only people that bypass security are family members. So I'll give you two guesses as to who I think that belonged to, but
Jill, it's got to be
luckily
Jill. There's
none
no
of
way it's
that
anybody
matters. There's actually a theory that's floating around that they're gonna put it on Kamala.
else. Oh, that would. Ooh.
That
Oh.
then if Biden either steps down or has to step down, then
This is how
Kamala
they get rid of
base
if they because they've been trying to get rid of Kamala for a while. I don't think it's going to work.
I don't think it will either,
I
but
don't. I think that looks really bad to pin it on Kamala because I don't think people buy that. But if you can, or pin it on her husband or
this
something.
administration will do anything and everything they want to, whether it's accurate or not. I mean, they just levied charges against a whistleblower. That
Yeah,
happened in
I
the
mean,
last
it's
week.
they're not even pretending not to be evil.
Yeah, somebody came out as a whistleblower, and what did they do? They pressed charges against him.
Like I'm a
Like,
I'm a whistleblower alleging that you're, abusing power and privileges, and they turn back around and go, well, we're going to abuse this power and privileges to arrest you.
I'm going to show you that I'm not abusing power and privileges by laying the fist down on top of you. Have
Yeah,
fun.
it's yeah. But getting back to Russia here for a second, um, the Azov thing seems like a trend with them where they are kind of constantly being embarrassed. I mean, not so much in their ammo production because they're kicking our ass in that regard, but the it seems like they're constantly making deals and getting burned, and then they keep making deals, but they keep getting burned.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what to say on that. I would tend to agree to a certain extent, but I don't know how much. I think part of it is that they're trying not to. My guess would be that they're trying not to look like the bad guy. And so if you're trying not to look like the bad guy, then you tend to will err on the side of caution. But I also think that Russia's going to keep this in mind down the road. So when Turkey comes back and needs something, sorry about your bad luck. Like, go call
Yeah.
your American buddies, which is going to be interesting because that's what the deal was. I forgot. I remember what Turkey got in exchange for these Azov
What?
F-16s.
Oh, that's right.
The
That's
F-16
right.
deal that has been like riding the line for forever, and yeah, we'll send them. No, we won't. Maybe we can. I don't know. That got approved.
And they're hoping that the
It's just a
F-16s
coincidence, though.
are a
It's not.
super.
It's definitely not
What do you think
like
that?
a tit for tat trade.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No one believes that. Absolutely no one. Like you don't even need to hide it. It's so obvious. It's like,
People are
but
nuts, man.
the I'm just wondering. I kind of the F-16 is so old. I kind of feel like the S-400s have that programmed in by default as like a signature. Like I'm not. that seems like
Well, I don't think that Turkey's going to use them against Russia.
it's up to Russia.
Maybe.
I mean, it may not happen in Turkey, but Turkey is expanding their presence into, I want to
Syria.
say, is it Syria? Okay. I thought it was other areas of Africa too, but also Iraq and generally in the Middle East. And
And yeah, that's another
Russia's going to want to
theory is
expand
that
influence.
Russia, Russian-backed Assad forces basically laid waste to a bunch of, I think, Turkish-backed, I want to say Kurdish forces in Syria
Yeah, I saw the
here
aftermath of attack
recently.
on a Turkish base, and it's gruesome.
And so Turkey may have been kind of pissed about that, but that's all right. I don't think the Russians really care all that much. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean it's all part of the games. I mean the
Mhm.
cluster munitions is going to be interesting, and of course it is in and of itself a like just one more Hippocratic moment for the Biden administration because it was what I want to say October that they were lamenting Russians' usage of cluster munitions and saying how it was
Yeah,
a war crime and how bad it was, even though
I
there was
don't
no
remember.
evidence of Russia doing it and definite evidence of Ukraine.
Well, and I don't know when it was, um, but yeah, I mean, sometime within probably the last year, like the U.S. government was calling out Russia as committing war crimes for utilizing the exact same type of ammunition that we are sending to Ukraine for them to use against Russia today. And yeah, and you're right, like Ukraine clearly used cluster munitions, and and part of those cluster munitions were also the I don't even remember what they call them, butterfly
Like
mines or
leaf,
whatever,
yeah, the little
that
leaf mines.
they're
They're
just nasty.
they're like toe poppers.
Yeah,
They're not. They're often fatal. I think they're
I don't think they're often fatal.
well, they're not immediately fatal.
They're
That's part of their effect.
yeah, they're an injury, but I mean like one of the biggest problems they have with them is they're plastic.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can't like metal detect them, and because of the color that they are, and I think you're right, it may have been October or something like that because I want to say it was in the fall because there were
That's when.
leaves on the ground everywhere. You couldn't like they look like a leaf.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. They're that
You
like
step on one.
brownish green color, and
Mhm.
you step on one, like get toe poppers. Your foot is gone.
Yeah.
Um, Now it's enough that it might also send shrapnel into your femoral artery, and you may bleed out and die. But these are classic. I forget what the term is, but they're designed to kind of attack the like functionality of a fighting force by forcing them to deal with wounded.
Yeah, it's designed to maim.
Yeah, it's the like they're still most. I think they're still more than 50% likelihood
It's
of death at some point.
yeah,
But
but I mean like not initially. It's not an
right,
initial death because it's the same reason that in the Civil War that the officers didn't sharpen their swords whenever they were going into battle. They intentionally took dull blades because if you're on horseback and you're riding through and you're hitting people, if you hit somebody with a sharp blade, you might cut an arm off, but it's a clean cut and it's easy for them to bandage back up and you can put that guy back out on the lines.
right.
So instead, if you hit them with a blunt blade, it creates fractures and cracks and internal hemorrhaging. And so now you've taken four people out of the fight to try to take care of that one person.
Yep.
It's the
There were
same
also, I mean, there was like the triangle shaped
trench knives.
bayonets,
Mhm.
but yeah, same kind of idea is like it's hard to stitch. It's often gets infected, and you like it's often fatal, but you just die a month later from infection. And so
Yeah, and those
all
are
of that time is using up medical resources, medical personnel, you know.
yeah, those would end up I think those would end up being banned
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a
because
few.
you can't stitch them. They're just almost impossible to stitch.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're still banned, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure it matters as much. I
Anything
think now
with
we can deal with it.
I think it's more anything with well, I mean, yeah, but when do we update laws that we've made years ago? It's
Whenever
a
they hinder the federal government.
well, that's true. Actually we don't even update them. We just ignore them. That's really what happens.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
mean
that's
I
that's
think
all
that's
war
a Hague,
crimes, Bill, right? Like,
right. I think that's a Hague Convention thing,
which
which we didn't sign on to, so I don't think
and we in fact have, and I think I've referenced this before, the Hague. It's called the Hague Invasion Act. So
yes.
I the idea of the U.S. criticizing other countries for war crimes has always just been eye rolling. It's like, okay, we all know it's full of shit because,
Just remember, it's never a war crime the first time.
or in the U.S. case, the 25th time.
Yeah.
Like,
You'd have to
our
prove
war
that we did it.
crimes are just like, look, you're making us look bad. Stop.
Here's the other thing. The only people that get prosecuted for war crimes are the losers.
Yes. I mean, I think we've prosecuted some people internally, but I think it's mostly about trying to save face in an
More
ongoing.
scapegoats and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. It's there's a lot of scapegoating where it's like, oh, the people that actually did this, well, they're all dead, but that guy was attached to the same squad or platoon, but like 3 months after the event, we're still going to try him because we need to throw somebody under the bus. I think there's something like that during the global war and terror, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Absolutely.
I don't know. The whole thing is sort of like it's I'm really concerned about I'm concerned about the fact that we're out of ammunition. Like,
Well,
and
well,
and
we
correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of our ammunition is made by China.
no idea. I couldn't even tell
Okay.
you. I don't. It depends on what you mean by ammunition. If you're specifically talking about the 155 millimeter shells, I don't know who makes them for us or if we actually make them because we haven't used 155s in probably, I mean, maybe used some in the global war on terror, but I mean, probably the last time we actually used them was the Gulf War, and we didn't even, I don't think we used them that much. And let's be real, like our fighting force is not designed for this kind of war, so they don't really utilize, I mean, look at the difference between our 155 guns and Russia's, I don't remember what they are, 152s,
Sure.
right? Ours are made of super strong materials, but they also heat stress and crack and become brittle, so you can't fire them anywhere nearly as much as what Russia can fire theirs before they have to go come out of the field and go back to be repaired.
Hmm.
Because we used them essentially like a 27-mile, or not 27 miles, maybe it's like 12 miles. Um, but we used them like a long range sniper rifle.
Yeah, I mean, we use them as like base support. Afghanistan and Iraq is like we would cover a bunch of fire bases with one artillery, one main base with artillery. And that was one of the ways we controlled an area when fighting the Taliban was we had artillery there. And so you would get a fire mission and you'd fire a few barrages, but then it would sit and cool down for a few hours, days, like because it would be
Yeah,
you'd be supporting an operation, not
right. It's
be the
intermittent
main part of the
firing.
operation that you get here in Ukraine. Sure.
I mean, Ukraine's firing what, 5,000 rounds of artillery shells a day?
Well,
Russia
it's
last count is firing 20 to 30,000 rounds.
but I mean it is yeah. I mean they're it's something like up to 10-to-1 ratio on a given engagement. Um, and yeah, it's some of this is though it's supply chain. Like the U.S. military
It's not
is
supply chain.
set up. What do you mean it's not supply chain?
It's manufacturing ability.
Well,
We outsourced
y-
the vast majority of our manufacturing because we wanted cheap Chinese goods.
but it's from a supply chain perspective that we did this. Like it's not just cheap. It's that the way the U.S. fights, we took the same private sector supply chain modeling that we use for most things and applied them to the military. The the problem is, to your point, we never expected to be fighting a war like this, and we didn't anticipate it. So we're expecting a the small protracted wars, basically, where we consume small amounts of munitions constantly compared to the massive amounts you have when going through stockpiles during like a trench warfare where we're seeing in Ukraine, right? So it's the we're set up to optimize logistics every step of the way, which feeds back into manufacturing,
Maybe. I
right?
mean,
It's like we're not set up to manufacture a ton. We're not set up to and there's just a manufacturing aspect of it where we're just kept outsourcing again because we're referencing the private sector for this stuff, which doesn't have the same strategic implications.
I I think it's more systematic or systemic, sorry. Because it's a thought process difference between the way that the US thinks and the way Russia thinks. So Russia would
Yeah.
build a facility,
Uh
right?
huh.
Any kind of manufacturing facility, doesn't matter, but just a manufacturing facility and have it where it may run one shift a day for 5 days a week. Whereas in the US, if we have capacity, we are utilizing every ounce of capacity at all times.
Yeah. That's
And
kind of what I'm
so,
referring to a little bit. I mean, it's not the only aspect. There's other aspects to that same supply chain, manufacturing, logistics
sure.
tree, but it's over optimized.
Well, I wouldn't even say that it's over optimized. I would just say it's different, right? Like we're utilizing the full capacity that we can at almost any given time of anything that we're doing on most facilities.
Hmm.
Most manufacturing facilities in the US that I've ever dealt with run two
Right.
shifts, some run three, and so they're utilizing all that capacity instead of just letting it sit. Because if we do that, then that means we can get our prices down, which means we can make higher margins by doing so.
Right. I
Whereas
would.
Russia doesn't think of it that way. What they think of is they go, we need a facility, we build it, we hire people to work one shift. Like that's why they can, do they tripled their manufacturing of tanks, of artillery shells, and did it within a few months because all they had to do was just train people. They already had the capacity available. They just had to do it. And the other
Right.
thing that
And
they do is they overbuild all of their manufacturing equipment. So if it requires a 20-ton press for a safety factor of 1.5, in the US, we might put in a 30-ton press. Russia
mhm.
has all the old Soviet era crap that is like, oh no, we're gonna make it a 100-ton press and we'll never have to replace it ever. And they
So I think
you
it's
don't have
important to.
downtime.
I mean, I think it's important to draw the distinction between Soviet and Russia because Russia is actively trying to de-Sovietify, or there's a name for it, but their systems because there was a lot of corruption and inefficiency from the Soviet era that caused a lot of problems. Not just inefficiency in terms of production, but um, making too big and not very nimble. So I don't know how much Russia's that's the adoption of Russia's um, paradigm and mentality versus how much of this is just a hangover from the Soviet era. Because I think if they're
Maybe
designing their new stuff, I'm not sure they're doing it to the same degree that you're referring to. But I do think in general, they're a lot more cognizant of long-term thinking and recognizing, and this is kind of what I mean by about over optimizing, is that they recognize that if you optimize for one thing, and that is cost efficiency, you are going to make yourself vulnerable to sudden changes in the market. And I think we're seeing that a lot with the ammunition production and general material production when it comes
all
to.
production.
Yes, well, I mean, I think you're seeing this now in the greater economy.
I mean, absolutely. Like, so here's the other thing that you kind of touched on is that in in like the supply chain world, what we would call that is, you know, uh, an impact order or unanticipated demand shifts, right? Whether that be up or down. And so when you're operating with super thin margins because you've optimized so tightly, you don't have anywhere to go, right?
Well, and it's not just impact orders. It could be
That's
equipment
why I said
breaks.
it can be impact orders or it can be like a demand shift.
Right, well, but man, it can be demand shift. It may be a production event that disrupts your ability to produce. Like if you lose 2 shifts or 2 days, so 4 shifts, because of something goes on with your
Sure.
plant. There's all sorts of things. And then you have to, and you're going to now struggle to gain that back. You're going to struggle to make up for it. You're going to struggle to meet that demand that can ripple through your entire business. And if you're so tightly optimized, and you're so tightly optimized with your suppliers and your consumers, and everybody in the chain is optimized, the entire economy, this ripple can easily amplify and build and trigger others and just propagate throughout the whole economy,
Oh, absolutely.
which I think we're starting to see. Like we were talking a lot about the
I don't know how much we're starting to see it from that perspective, but I do think that per the
what
conversation we had earlier that there's a lot of economic factors or indicators that are all pointing at a fall in the autumn.
yeah, I'm gonna try and pull this up, but I think it's the same thing because yeah, fall in the autumn. Um, I I think that it's the same kind of principles, but in finance, right? You're not
Yeah,
trying to do
absolutely.
efficiency. You're trying to be efficient with your money, and then if you have a lot of things go bad all at the same time, that can cause a cascade failure. But I pull it up, some of the things you're pointing at, they're indicating a September, August, maybe October kind of
Yeah.
blow up. I mean, because we have the yield curve inversion 2 and 10. You could probably explain that a little bit better than me.
Yeah, so the yield curve inversion generally refers to the 2-year and the 10-year treasury bond um, inverting, where you have a higher rate for a long term than you do for a short term. And so when that's inverted, then that means that your long term is yielding less than a short term bond. So why would you invest your money for 10 years when you get a higher yield for in only investing it for 2, right?
right, and
And
usually that indicates that there's going
part
to
of
be
that
a rough
is
patch.
part of that is that what that is, it's a long indicator. So that ends up being an indicator that historically has indicated that there will be a recession in roughly 12 to 18 months.
So it's sort of a market. It's saying that the market believes that there's going to be a significant economic downturn very short.
Yes. Well, it depends on what you consider very shortly. I mean, 18 months is yield curve inversion. That happened February, March of last
Right,
year.
right.
But if you do the math on that, 18 months out, August,
What?
September this year.
Yeah, that meant that the start of this signal was March. We expected a recession kind of March this year. Didn't really get it. But that's expecting that by October we'll have gotten that crashing point.
It's kind of the
Um,
estimation, but again,
but
it's a leading indicator.
we're also kind of waiting on the reversion to that, right? That's usually indicating that you're entering the recession, right? Because they're now seeing that,
Well,
right?
historically, that's been a 3 to 6 month indicator.
Unless there's like a
When the
double
two and ten
recession coming.
when the 2 and 10 revert, the problem is that you have the government and the Fed and the Treasury and everybody is working together to try to put this off and hold off on it as much as they can. Because what you actually saw is you saw the 210 uh, ratio started coming back up towards the zero line, pushing for an inversion, which would have happened probably 2 or 3 months ago. And then it started going back down again and actually hit one of the highest rates that it's ever been. It was inverted by a full interest point, 100 basis points.
That almost sounds like
It's
you
huge.
have one recession that was then stepped on by a larger one.
Well, yeah, I think all you did was delay it, and what ends up happening is you compound those issues.
Right. So like it wanted to return, and then you'd have your recession, but they delayed it, making it worse.
What happened 2 or 3 months ago?
Been a busy year.
3 banks.
Oh yes.
Three banks
Oh yes, that was
collapsed and were bailed out, and then the Fed put together a whole new tool that they've never had before in order to give operational liquidity to banks.
right.
And what most people aren't paying attention to is that those 3 banks combined were larger than the 2008 crash. Larger.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to measure because of it was kind of more drawn out. But yes, I looked at it. It's at least a significant chunk of however you want to define the crash.
And
Because a lot of banks failed later, given that. But that puts in like you talk about the banking leverage cycle, looking to
yeah, so
come due
that
right
that
around.
actually kicks into the other thing. We're seeing commercial real estate that's having problems, to the tune that there have been one, two, three that I can think of, 3 instances where a borrower or a renter, I think it was a borrower, just walked away.
Oh, I just saw
Like
some stuff today in
didn't
Atlanta.
even. Oh, that's new. I'm
This is
talking
no,
about.
literally, this happened today, where
Oh,
you had a
nice.
bunch of hotels in Atlanta walked away from. I want to say, let me see if I can pull it up, but it was
While you do
uh
that, here's
walked
here's
away
the
from 19, keeping 15
19 keeping 15.
properties.
Okay.
They turned in the
How
keys
many
on 19
dollars is that?
proproperties.
Those are hotel
Um,
properties?
hotel properties, large ones.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's
So that's what
like
happened
it's
in California, right?
oh
You had like a
malls.
Hilton, you had a mall, and I can't remember what the other one was. But what's funny is that those, not funny, what's interesting is that those happened, the timing of those and the timing of the bank crashes happened to coincide with commercial real estate releveraging, because commercial real estate, for people who don't know, they only get like a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year note, and then they have to refinance the balance of whatever they owe. And so the number 2 and number 3 largest recapitalization months were the same 2 months that we had bank crashes earlier this year. The number 1 month for recapitalization happens to be coming up. And I
So
can't remember if it's August or it's September, but I think it's September.
to clarify, so you're saying that with the because the walking away from the mall and all that stuff, I believe that happened after the banking the banks failed,
Yes, those did
but
happen after the bank failed, but
but it
it's an
corresponded with the
indicator of
right. It probably corresponded with the releveraging of it, and they saw it
correct.
on their books. Didn't look good. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean like these banks have been they're coming out and saying like, hey, we tried to work with these people. Like we wanted to renegotiate, make numbers that would work for them. And these people are saying, I don't care what numbers you throw at me. I don't care. You can have the keys. You can have the property.
right. It's the I can't make money with this. Like I can't. Like if they can't make money, they can't make money. It's no longer an asset. It's a liability.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter what what deal you can get. Sean, how much would you pay for a liability?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question because every homeowner in the US has been told for years that their house, their home, is their biggest asset. And so that people who aren't aware, that is wrong. Your assets pay you money every month, or at least gain in value and don't cost you money every month.
Yeah,
Your liabilities cost you every month. And if you don't believe that, try buying a house this month and then selling it in 2 years. Because what'll happen if you go back, you can look at the numbers, it's all there.
for the
When
record,
in
don't do that.
Yeah,
That's probably a bad idea.
that is bad. That is not, again, not financial advice. Just saying, if you don't believe me, like this happened in '08. People were buying at the top of the market. They were buying with uh, high percentage rates, just like we have now. And they were like, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just refinance it later, which would have been fine, except for home values dropped, depending on where you were at, somewhere 30 up to 50%. So if you bought, even if you didn't buy an extravagant home, say you bought a house that was 300 or $400,000, and it's now valued at 150 to 200,000, you're underwater on it. They won't refinance it at all.
Hmm.
Period. They don't care.
Yeah,
So
I
there's
it's
no sense in doing that. And that's a problem. And
one and
that's
didn't
the
you
issue we're
say
going to get into.
didn't you say something like the something about individual like consumer saving rates are going to net zero soon
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, if you look at the
Yeah,
trend, you look at the graph for consumer savings, those dollars are going, they're pointing at zero, pointing at August, September.
and that's going to happen before their biggest asset goes belly up.
Oh, absolutely. And the
So
other thing that's been
you can
going on
imagine what
that people
saving rates are
haven't been
actually going to go
paying
to.
attention to is revolving lines of credit, aka credit cards, have been skyrocketing.
Well,
They
didn't
went
there
from,
wasn't there COVID rules to help facilitate taking on more revolving lines of credit? Or am I
I
making
don't
that
know
up?
about that. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay,
But,
I could be wrong on that.
but that has skyrocketed from, I think, 300, I can't remember. I want to say it was 300 million to now it's over a trillion. If it's not over, it's just like touching it.
I
It's
mean,
huge.
well, and that's what happens when you tell everybody this is temporary, this is transitory.
Right.
They don't they don't change their habits, they don't change their behaviors. They put on their credit card until they can figure out how to do it. And I think it seems like our labor force has also gotten a lot more passive when it comes to demanding more money. They're just expecting social pressure to do it or something. But
Well, no, for a long time, nobody asked for more money because they were in good shape and so they were just fat and happy. Like they were too comfortable.
oh, sure. I mean that
Like
I'm
you were seeing
comparing
for
it to
years,
like last time things were rough.
right? But you have to remember, humans as a species have the memory of a goldfish. Like they don't remember,
Yeah.
and actually a lot of the people that are younger don't remember it because they didn't live through it.
Well, but
They didn't have to
even
deal with
then,
it.
I just think that the temperament of the labor forces in the aggregate is much more passive than it was in like '08. No,
Nah,
you don't think so? Maybe I'm
not
just
as a
exposed. It
not as a
seems like the
general
youth
rule.
is, but maybe I'm.
Well, the youth doesn't remember '08.
Which is, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe
And
that's kind of my
if you
point.
think
Is I may
about it,
be
they don't
biased in my
have
sampling.
yeah, if you look at the youth, like they don't have expenses. They don't have these huge they don't have mortgages, they don't have car payments, and if they do, they don't have all of the, children and all these other things that add up over time that people take on over life, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, they have a bunch of excess income. So why do they need to go fight and argue with somebody about getting more money when they're living high on the hog? Like they can buy whatever they want, they get to go play with their friends, they can afford their Starbucks every day.
But they
And
can't
part
imagine
of
losing their job because the last 4 times they went looking for a job, it was easy.
and part of it is, in addition to that, they haven't had to pay their student loan payments, which,
Oh
by
yeah,
the way,
that's
they have to
September.
restart paying those August and September. Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
but Sean,
they're not getting the
surely,
$10,000 or $20,000 that was gonna be wiped off of their bill. And my grandfather told me something one time, and I never believed him until I got older and really like sat down and realized it one time. He told me the expenses always rise to meet the income. And I was like, there's no way. Of course, I was 18 and knew everything, right? And I was like, Grandpa, like, there's no way. Like, if I was making $85,000 a year, there's no way that my expenses would rise to meet my income.
I mean, mine didn't,
I,
but
and in fairness, right? Like, I
but
don't, mine didn't rise to meet my income at all times, but there have been times in my life where I have spent every penny that I was making and wasn't saving anything aside. Now, that's no longer the case, and I'm, you know, stashing basically half my paycheck, but that's different and it's accurate. And most people are not aware enough and are not paying attention enough to realize that this is coming and it's going to happen whether you like it or not.
you're not so obvious. You're not seriously suggesting though that people
No,
didn't just keep stashing away their student loan payments just in case. Like that'd be the obvious thing to do was just to keep putting it into account and letting that money in, like you put in a CD or something, gain 4%,
they
right? They
definitely,
obviously did that, right? No,
yeah, they
no.
definitely didn't go buy boats. They definitely didn't go buy cars, which, by the way, saw an article the other day. We are at the highest rate by percentage of people with $1,000 a month car payments in history.
$1,000 a month car payments.
Mhm.
The
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah.
Wow.
Coincidentally, on that news, repos are up.
Gee, I wonder
I'll
why.
definitely not. I mean, it's just correlation. I'm not saying it's causal, but and they're going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's going
I
to get
mean,
real
it's
bad. Like the
well, you're
if you
saying the
go look at
like you're saying the used
new
car market.
cars.
Well, but the
Well,
thing is, like
used car
new
market's
cars.
actually starting to come down.
That's my point. Like that is another signal that this is starting to get bad because used cars markets are a substitute. And for those that
Uh-huh.
aren't familiar, you go economically. What you see is as the economy goes down, even if it's just a little blip, people switch to substitutes. They switch to chicken instead of beef. You know, they take less lavish vacations. They do all of these sorts of things,
Careful.
and
You're starting to sound like the people at our government who do the CPI.
but they go into these substitutes. Well, but what happens is depending on the substitute. Like obviously, food you just switch substitutes more and more because you have to eat. But you don't have to buy a new car. So what you see is at first the this substitute market will go up, and then at a certain point it'll go down because people just aren't buying at all. They are
You want
delaying purchases. They are
you want to know
waiting
what
until
an F-150 costs right now?
new, used.
New, new.
What?
Most of them that I've seen have been somewhere between 80 and 100 grand.
Oh, that's cheap.
No,
No,
no. An F-150,
I thought
an
they're going to be
F-150
like
should be like
120,
$45,000.
Really? Okay.
150. Regular half-ton 150.
Oh, without maybe it's just whenever I look at like features and stuff, it gets up to 120, 150.
If you're
But
looking at a Ford Raptor, maybe,
no, I just thought I remember
or
looking
a
at maybe
Platinum.
maybe this was
There,
in inflated
now there
numbers,
was
but
a time when things were skyrocketing. That what was happening is they couldn't get new vehicles, and so dealers were adding dealer markup.
mm-hmm.
A market adjustment is what they call it.
Mm,
And so they were just, and people were buying them. I looked at it and I was like, there's no way. Like I was looking because I wanted to get a Super Duty, and like I, I don't need one.
yeah,
I don't need one. I could use one. Like I could definitely use one, but I don't need one.
I
And
mean,
I wasn't willing to pay. I mean, those things are 90 to 100 grand, like just
yeah, and maybe that's what I
baselines.
was looking at
It's
there.
nuts.
Because I mean, I've got a bunch of land. I gotta be able to get equipment, and so I want something to actually tow a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
Um, but
But they're
that is
just
not in the
like
budget.
parking lots are filling up at dealerships, new car dealerships
So
specifically.
if I get
And
this year's model next year, it might be real cheap, huh?
no,
No?
give it, well, just watch it. I would say just watch it.
Okay.
Watch the market because that may be the case. Um, but you got to figure that like this is about the time that the next year model starts hitting the dealership. So all those trucks that are sitting out there
Mm,
now, they're fixing to become last year's model.
right. Right. And my guess is they've already figured out how much of next year's models they're going to make.
Well, that has happened. You've had several of the plants have had intermittent shutdowns because they've got too much inventory and they don't need to continue building. Um, so you've got that, and then on top of that, what you're going to have is you're going to have an excess of inventory. But they didn't want to reduce the prices in their vehicles, so what they did is they increased the MSRP on the next year's models. That's what they did 2022 to 2023. They're going to do it, I think, again 2023 to 2024. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you
Is
say the
this
MSRP is. There are people that will buy it, but it doesn't matter if they can't afford it. Like,
and is this all part of could this all be part of getting people used to not owning a car?
I maybe I think it's probably more likely the vehicle companies have short memories, and they're like, well, we got these people to pay these prices. Like, no, you got some people, some dumb people probably to pay those prices. And I think I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Jeep or Dodge that actually came out and said, we're okay with selling less vehicles because the markup that we'll make on each vehicle will make the same amount of money. We don't have to sell as many vehicles.
I mean, I can believe that. I could believe
Which,
that they're that they could take a significant hit in sales if they're that pricey, which I mean, some people they just need the vehicle. Now,
right.
I don't know why they're not buying used. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe they couldn't get the. I don't know. I mean, it seems.
The problem with that, the problem with that theory is you've got so much competition in the market that somebody's going to start hurting and they're going to undercut you.
Yep.
Like if Ford, which I think Ford is actually built up to be able to produce way more vehicles than Dodge or Chevy and maybe combined. Because the Ford F-150 has been the nation's number one selling vehicle for years, like
Yep.
decades,
Yep.
right? Okay. Well, they could crank that up and just ship them out the door because they need to cover overhead. Because, dude, those trucks sit on that lot for so long, and you got to start paying on them.
Well, and they
It's going to
they
cost dealerships thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars.
and if I recall correctly, Ford made kind of a bad bet during the chip shortage due to COVID supply chain issues, where all the other companies stopped making vehicles, but Ford's like, nah, we'll just keep making them and we'll get chips later. And I
I
don't
don't
know,
know
as
if that
far
was
as
a
I
bad
can,
bet or not.
I mean, they probably have tons of inventory as a result because I didn't get the sense that there was a lot of like a glut of purchasing after that. But maybe I missed that. Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
because it's,
I honestly, I'm not sure, and I couldn't even speak to it because I don't have any information on it whatsoever. I haven't
yeah, I
heard
mean,
about that at all. I
I'm
do
sort of
remember
guessing.
seeing like there were huge, enormous parking lots next to the factory there in Kentucky, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had a
That
lot of malls renting up parking space to these guys because no one's going to the malls.
Yeah, so they were just well, this one actually was I want to say it was a derelict track, like a
Okay.
NASCAR track,
Right.
and they had trucks on the track, on the infield, like the entire parking lot. They had it all just packed full of what looked to be Super Duties, not even F-150s, but they might have been.
Yeah.
Um, and my guess is, I think a lot of them probably diesels. There's something
Mm.
different about the diesels because when you couldn't find those Super Duty trucks and when they were really scarce, the ones that did come on the market were all gas engines. Nobody was putting out hardly any diesel models,
Okay.
which I thought was really odd, and that's why it stood out to me.
Is it is it maybe they require a specialized chip? They're
Maybe.
hard to get. Because I mean, we're
Could
still
be.
having supply chain issues. So the idea that they suddenly fix their chip supply chain is seems odd because it seems like
Yeah, I don't know.
everybody everywhere is having supply chain issues.
Yeah, and then what do you do with those vehicles? Like those were built in 2021. You're not going to turn them out as 2024 models, right?
I
It's going to be real
well,
hard to sell that.
maybe 2024 and a half. I don't know.
They've all got VIN numbers on them, so you have to have them dated as to when they
Mm.
were manufactured. So if you've got a 2024 model with a 2021 date of manufacture, people are going like that'll start lawsuits. That would be my guess,
Yeah,
because that's misleading to the public.
I don't know. We'll find out.
I would think, but
So,
I think
given that
that's going to
things are
be
about to, given that the fall is coming, what can we do about it? What should we do about it? What is it? Some advice you'd give people?
me personally. My advice, and I've been preaching this to all of my friends, anybody that I know, anybody that would listen since the 2 and 10 inverted, and that is stack cash, stack cash, stack cash. And how you do that is you eliminate any non-necessary expenses. That means cut off Netflix, you don't get Amazon Prime, you don't get you don't go out to eat, nothing. Like you cut every cost that you can as much as possible and put cash away. Don't buy any
So,
major, don't no major purchases. If you have like retirement accounts, convert them from, high yield, which is usually in stocks, to something that is much more risk averse, which would be like bonds.
yeah, I've been setting up for bonds. Found out how to do that with Fidelity. Um, so to clarify though, what you're saying is if you are in stocks, index funds, crypto, that you probably want to find a good exit strategy and
Quickly,
get into cash very soon
real
in the
fast.
next 30 days max.
Mhm.
Like you got to think of like like August 1st, in fact, so less than 30 days. August 1st should probably be like you should be out by then is your goal.
I mean, sure, it just depends, right? It depends on what your tolerance is, right?
Sure.
And this is one of the things that I tell people every time that I talk about finances. One, you have to know what your risk tolerance is, and two, how much time and energy are you willing to dedicate to paying attention to the market and realizing what's going on. For me personally, it's about capital preservation. I have been out of the markets for, I don't know, 3 months now because I saw that this was coming and I didn't want to get caught holding the bags. It doesn't matter how good your portfolio is doing. If the stock market drops 50%, your value is now 50% less.
Yep.
If you if you track 2008 crash, it crashed over a total of 4 months,
Hmm.
and it took, I think it was 6 months and 18 months, right? Roughly.
Okay.
6 months down, it took 18 months to regain back to where you were.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah. I
we're
mean, it
talking about 2 years
makes sense. I'm
round
taking a
trip.
little more aggressive strategy personally, not by much. Like I'm mostly in cash, but I'm also looking at things that are, I think, going to weather the storm a little bit better and trying to time that. But
Such as,
um, some dividend stocks where I
sure,
think they will bounce and recover, and they're going to continue to pay out regardless of major economic downturn or do better potentially. I'm looking at things that are sort of natural hedges against the market, things that are taking short positions relative to funds that are more in line with thinking of the market. So as traditional holdings drop, those should go up. Um, the what I've noticed is like defense stocks don't seem to be as impacted by these sorts of things and tend to be more in fluctuation with things like I don't know um, a big government order to build back their stockpile of munitions. Let's
yeah.
say,
I mean,
um,
yes, but
but
here's the other thing on that. I don't think that they'll be immune.
no, I
If the
think they're
stock market starts cratered, like the rest, say the rest of the average of the stock market goes down 50%, they may only go down 25 or 30.
sure, but
But they also pay
and
good dividends, if I
yeah, it's not.
recall.
Some do, some don't. Depends
Decent,
on the.
yeah.
Some are surprisingly don't pay out that much, but that's kind of what I'm looking at, and I'm keeping my eye on it. I don't. It's not a huge chunk of my portfolio, so if it goes down, I can handle it. Um, but I sort of along the bet of we're going to have. I'm basically betting that it's part of the economic downturn that the government is going to put a big influx of cash, and part of that is going to be in building back munition stockpile.
Hmm.
Not sure when that's going to be, but I'm would not be surprised if it's this fall or winter.
Yeah. So
But
correct. And to be clear, like the other thing, like I'm not trying to hit the very bottom of the market. I don't. I I can't call the top of the market. I can't call the bottom of the market.
sure.
Right. I'm looking at most most of the move. That's the reality. So if I feel like something's dropped down, and I still have some money in certain things, but most of everything that I have is sitting in cash right now because I think there's going to be better buying opportunities. And if there are, then I'm going to increase my positions into those at a better buying opportunity. Again, capital preservation and the ability to maximize your profits. The other thing that I'm watching is, so one of the quick indicators is usually your Fed interest rate, right?
Hmm.
So they did a pause last month, but with the notation that you just remember we're going to increase it. We're going to keep going. Well, Jim Cramer tweeted today, higher and longer. which means I took that to mean that he believes that interest rates are going to be pushed higher and stay higher for longer. Which, if anybody understands how Jim Cramer works, I think that's probably going to mean that they stay flat or go down, and I bet we stay flat to the end of the year,
I
and then
thought he was talking about
or
Hunter
close
Biden.
to,
I'm
and
sorry.
then
That
well,
that
yeah,
makes more sense.
yeah, I can see how you could be confused about that,
It's topical.
but yeah, well, I think it's uh, nasally ingested, not topical. I don't think it does
Well,
anything
actually,
but just
actually,
on
I
your
think it works
skin,
both ways, but
but it
they
might.
tend to do more nasally, but it does work topically. Um,
Or so you hear.
Tingly. So I hear.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how that's going. That doesn't seem like that's a good thing. Uh, Historically, whenever the Fed has paused raising rates, they have there's been I think there's been one time that they started raising rates again.
Yeah, I think we've
And
established that things are
so that's
the fall is
probably
coming.
how that's going to go. And amongst everything else that's going on, like, oh, the one that came out today, BRICS is introducing their new currency, gold-backed currency. Guess when
Yeah,
that one comes out?
September,
August.
August. Oh, so close. Let's
They have
see if it
a
actually gets out in
conference
August.
in August, and they're going to be announced. I don't know that it's necessarily getting released. It's being
Okay,
announced, which just the
but
announcement alone will shake markets,
yeah,
generally
I mean
speaking.
that what it'll be interesting what gold does then. I think they've probably been purchasing over the course of this. So,
They have been.
right, it's not like there's going to be a sudden flux of them trying to buy, but I think a lot of people will be there might be some market activity as a result of this, but
Newsflash: Russia's been increasing their gold holdings
it's been for like a year and a
since
half. No?
since
Wait, what year is it?
2014.
So since 2014. I thought there was a very recent increase of that
Well,
too, but
they
yeah,
did a year and a half ago. Whenever we put sanctions on them, they basically pegged stuff to gold by offering X number of rubles per gram of gold.
okay.
Anybody that
Oh yeah,
wanted
there
to
was like
sell to they were just buying gold.
I guess you
And
want
people
to
were
get rid
like,
of
"Oh,
gold.
why are they buying gold?" And then some folks started looking into it, and they're like, their gold stash was kind of flat until 2014, and then they started accumulating at a fairly rapid rate. Just happens to coincide with a Maidan coup in Ukraine. Not, I'm just saying it's a correlation, not necessarily a
I mean, it's
causation.
if you're worried about an economic hitman and destabilizing your currency, that's a pretty good hedge against that.
Or if you expect that sometime in the future you're going to get sanctioned, guess what
What
is
has
a universal currency that nobody will say no to?
yes, but and there's some recent discussions among some smart people on Twitter around whether or not gold will continue to be a good store of value long term. Short term in terms of next 5 years, probably. But there's there's a lot of people that are call them renegade in finance, but fairly knowledgeable in it. So they don't toe the party line and things
Yeah.
that are just like, look, the reality is that gold is now a terrible currency. It's a terrible a gold backed monetary system is just doesn't work in the modern era. Um,
Why not?
the the short answer is it's complicated, but it's based primarily around the depth of liquidity that's available in modern currencies versus compared to gold and what that would do. Um, Not to
Well,
mention the
but it
digital age of
not
banking and
being, yeah, but not being used as a currency, but being used as a backing for currency or as a store of value. Gold hasn't been used really as a currency much in
what's the difference?
centuries.
Well, I don't mean there's a literal, like, I'm going to physically transmit gold, but if it's backed by gold, fundamentally, what's the difference?
Well, because that that is a that is how you store the value that you've created, right? It
Gold
has an
is?
intrinsic, yeah, it has an
Yeah.
intrinsic value that people agree on, right? As a general rule,
Okay.
across the globe, it has a use case. So it's used in a lot of different things, from jewelry to manufacturing processes. It's
Yeah.
utilized,
Hmm.
but it has always been something that has been used as a, store of wealth, or as a show of what your, you know wealth
Right.
has been, and that, and but very rarely in a couple hundred years has it actually been used as a currency.
Well, I think it'll always be a store of value simply because it's durable, it's
Hmm.
pretty, and it now unfortunately it's starting to have a lot of other uses that are functional, such as um, like connectors and even some medical uses. I think where it's we're starting to find truly practical uses for it. Whereas before it's a soft, malleable metal that's pretty was the way it was for a long time.
Right.
So it
Well, a
being
lot of
super
times,
expensive is not that big of a deal.
right. And a lot of times what we do is we actually use silver as a replacement.
Yeah, and it works pretty well in a lot of
It
cases,
doesn't,
but
yeah, it doesn't
there's
work as well as gold does. And like, one of the things that gold's used in a lot, chips,
yes, yes, and
your
silver
computer
does
chips.
not. It can't really be replaced. Now, it's not a huge amount of gold,
No,
but our need for chips has skyrocketed so much that if you like, it's starting to be significant.
a microgram of gold in each, you know, set of chips that you manufacture adds up real fast.
It might not be. It might even be a milligram,
I'm just saying. Like,
but yeah, it's
I'm just like trying to get the point across that, yeah, it
sure.
adds up because of the sheer volume, because you're not using very much. But yes, it does add up a lot over
But
time.
think about how many chips you have in your house. Think about every single
Mhm.
device that is smart or smart-ish. There might be some gold in that.
Actually, basically every device that you have in your house that utilizes electricity,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
they all have chips
It
in them
might
now.
be microgram, might be milligram, depending
Hmm.
on size,
Very,
complexity, all that. But
it's very little. I mean, even even your fancy computer is still got very, very little gold in it, and it actually utilizes more than probably any other piece of electronics in your house.
yep.
But I mean,
But it's
if
starting
your
to be
coffee
used
maker
in
turns itself on and off, guess what? It's got a chip in it.
right, right. So you might have, you know, you in your house might in all
If
electronics you might have a few grams of gold, but
No,
that's in.
probably not even that. You should
I
watch
mean,
some YouTube videos where they actually reclaim the gold off of, like, uh, RAM chipsets is where it's used a lot. There's a
yeah,
lot
RAM
more
uses a lot.
because of those connections.
I also think in modern designs of graphics cards as well.
Yeah,
But
GPUs. But RAM is cheap comparatively to graphics cards.
yes.
And so you can get used RAM for basically free, like people just throw it away. And so there are people on YouTube that you can go watch where they go and they get a pair of scissors and they cut the teeth off of the RAM chips, and they put it in this solution, and they have to add this, and then they
Hmm.
filter it all down, and it's nothing. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, you could make some gold. And then they got done, and I was like, that is a lot of work for, like, nothing, nothing.
Yeah, there's probably more value in trying to harvest the simpler, easier metals such as aluminum and copper
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
But no, I mean, but I don't know that there's that much. I don't know the percentages of that. Because I think I think I was reading about some of the semiconductors they're using are actually using some gold in them, which increases the amount of gold, and that may not be easily recoverable either.
Mm-mm.
Um, and that might be part of it. They're not recovering all of the gold; they're recovering 90% of it.
Yeah,
But
and I can confirm semiconductors do utilize gold in them.
okay, yeah, and like yeah, I think it might be a couple grams in everything in your house because
And I
there are a
only know that
lot of chips in your
be-
house.
because I happen to know that I can't remember if it's hydrochloric acid or if it's uh, um, liquid cyanide that will strip gold off of things.
I think it's liquid cyanide.
I used to work in a factory that cleaned the deals that they'd spray to make chipsets,
Hmm.
and I remember it intently because there are two wash baths in between. Because if you mix hydrochloric acid with liquid cyanide, it creates hydrocyanide gas.
That sounds unpleasant.
It's so dangerous that by the time you've smelled it, you've already overdosed.
That's nice.
So they have huge vent hoods running at all times directly above it just in case it makes any accidentally. Yeah, it's safe, super safe.
Uh, um, but no, I mean like there might be there might be actually I'm thinking I was gonna say 500.
But
I might there might be a
but who
thousand chips in
cares?
this room.
Doesn't
But
matter.
yeah, okay. So, but as a result of that, the amount of gold being used in practical uses, it's starting, and the amount of value in current monetary systems. Having a significant gold-backed currency just doesn't really work.
Why not? Again, why not?
Um, well,
It worked whenever gold was worth $20 an ounce, and it works now currently at gold at $2,000 an ounce. I don't know why it wouldn't work in the future.
what do you mean it works now with $2,000 and it's not being used as monetary. There's no major currency is backed by gold.
Well, no, because we murder anybody who tries to start one.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say those are major currencies. Those are just, it's not even about getting back on gold, it's getting
Any,
off the dollar. But I
but
mean,
any currency. I mean, yeah,
there's a lot of complexity as to why we would murder somebody like that beyond just getting off the dollar. But I I did the math at one point, and it would increase the cost of gold by like I think something like 2,000 times.
okay,
Um, and assuming that doesn't that is that ignores the disruption of trying to adopt a currency that size. So that's assuming a long, slow process.
sure.
Um,
Well, I mean, you have to think about it. The only reason that we've been able to have an economy that's this large is literally because we've printed it into existence. And because the US dollar was not tied to gold, was not backed by gold, tied to gold since 1970, what, 1, 2, 69, something like that. That's when you've seen all this inflation and printing of money and all that kind of fun stuff. This is the reason that the gold has not inflated along with it because it's not tied to it. If you tied it to it, you couldn't do the inflation that we do now because you couldn't just print
yeah,
money.
what
You have to go buy gold to be able to back that.
you would have significant economic issues that would make it. You'd run into significant issues of probably potentially run into significant deflation, which could be a problem, like a big problem, um, which would that could really hurt an economy permanently too. Like you could destroy a lot of value that way. Um, you would like you just don't have the fluidity that we have now. Granted, yes, it's being manipulated by
That's the
morons in office, but
but that's the point. The point of having a gold-backed currency is so that you don't have the fluidity, that you have something stable and solid to base your currency on, so that everybody else that you trade with can have a level of trust that there is something backed behind it.
Yeah, and we'd be worse off with it if we had done that. Like that's the
What do you
reality
mean?
of it.
How so?
The economy, the production value of things would not have been as good as it was.
We, you mean the US
The globe,
or the world?
the global economy.
I mean, I disagree to a certain extent because I think that if you do that, you have to take that value from somewhere.
You have to take
So
take
if you're
do
if
what?
you're if you're inflating the currency,
Yes, yes.
who's losing the value?
Everybody that holds a dollar.
Okay. So why would that make the economy better?
It would make this is complicated. So it would. I'm not saying inflating makes the economy better. I'm saying having a fiat currency when we transitioned off the gold into fiat versus keeping the gold was better. Now we're in the point where we don't care about we've basically
But why and how was it better? That's my question.
um we
Because
were
we
able
have,
to grow in real like actual real value terms significantly more because we didn't have liquidity issues.
and I would argue that you're wrong on that.
You're I mean,
Because here's the deal. Does it seem like that we are? Yes, it seems like that we are. But if you look at it, look at like I'm trying to remember. I think it was like 1993 to 2023,
okay.
right? $1 million in 1993 would be the equivalent of 2.5 million today,
Yeah. Like
right?
I don't doubt that like in recent decades the US has gone off the rails with inflation and has gone really, really bad. Especially in the last 2+ decades, like 2.5 decades.
Right. But we didn't have any issues from like 1945 to 1973, 1971, whatever it was.
You're right.
There weren't any growth issues.
And I'm not saying we're not heading in an issue where it's going to be worse on net, but as we opened up the global economy, doing that in gold would have been so severely limiting that it would have been worse.
Uh, I mean, I don't think
Like
so. I
we just
disagree
need
because it,
the depth of liquidity of the dollar is so much greater, and the world needed that.
uh, again, I don't agree. I don't think that that's the case. I think you would have, I think you would have just grown at a reasonable rate, and you would have been able. Like, we're destroying the middle class.
Yeah,
We're absolutely in the U.S. We are absolutely destroying the middle class. And what we
we're
did by doing that and fiating everything is that we gave the ability for us to switch the US from a manufacturing to a financial economy or to a service economy.
yeah,
And part of that also was outsourcing all of our manufacturing to China in
yeah,
exchange for cheap labor. I would argue that if we had not done those two things, based on the fact that we could do them because we have fiat currency, that we would just continue to have grown. I mean, if you look at it, look at the 60s and 70s as far as like what the cost
well,
of an average car was to what to what like an average salary was, and what the average house was to what an average salary was.
right, and you're
Asset prices have absolutely inflated astronomically.
yeah, and if we just didn't mismanage the fiat, things would still be pretty darn good. But in recent decades we've horribly mismanaged fiat, and that is killing us. Now, if you want to like it,
It was always mismanaged. I mean, we only switched to fiat in 70. So for the first 23 years, you think we managed it well between 1970 to 1993?
pretty well, yeah. Now I have some issues with the structure of it. Could have been designed better, and that's part of the problem we're running into. Is that we designed it in a greedy, arrogant manner instead of
Well,
one that was based on controls, which was what this country is built on.
I mean, look at it from a real standpoint. The reason that we switched to a fiat currency was because we couldn't, or we didn't want to satisfy our debts. France was holding US dollars, contacted DC and said, hey, we have all these US dollars. We don't have any use for them. We'd like the gold equivalent. Can you go ahead and hand that out? We had already been using it like fiat prior to that, namely because of the Vietnam War that we decided to get involved in for God knows why, because Russia
I mean,
bad and stop
well,
communism.
communism is pretty bad, but
It is for people who live under it, yes.
yeah, I mean, it's yeah. Um, I don't know if it was Vietnam War per se. Some people point to some creative accounting on World War II stuff, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, like the inevitability of going to a fiat system. I'm not sure like I'm not sure the causal effect being Vietnam is particularly
You're saying that it
relevant to
was
inevitability.
inevitable.
Yes.
Okay. I I
I
don't
mean,
see why that has to be or why that should be.
okay.
It allows
Um,
it, I mean, going to a fiat allows you to just do whatever you want to as a government. And do we really, I mean, like if we think about it, if you sit back
kinda.
and
I
think
mean,
about it,
it's
is there
the
any
current
time that you
iteration.
can think of that you can go back and point to between 1970 and now where the government has done a good job with money, where they haven't spent wildly, where they haven't spent extravagantly or exorbitantly, they haven't wasted funds?
I mean, can you go back to a time before then that they didn't?
Well, I mean, I- I'd have to go look and do some research, but I feel fairly confident that, yeah, you probably can.
I mean, because it just seems like what they've always done, and that just seems like the will of the people. Is ultimately that's what they want, whether they like it or not. The will of the people is they want the government to be able to spend wildly.
I, I don't think that's the case. I think it was probably forced upon them and they didn't really feel like they had much. I mean, you have to figure the amount of information that was out and available back in the day, you couldn't be as informed as you can be now.
Oh, sure.
So there's no way to know for sure like what your senator did or didn't vote for, and he could easily lie to you,
Yeah,
right? So so who knows? We don't it's going to be hard to really tell, you
that's
know.
fair. I mean, I think going forward, I don't think that any commodity is going to be the good backing. I think a decentralized fiat solves a lot of the problems we've seen with corrupt fiats.
I mean, yeah, maybe. And
Um,
maybe that well, I don't know. The euro hasn't done so well.
okay.
It's been okay.
What's that? I'm not sure what that is in terms of.
I mean, it seems like it's a more decentralized fiat, let's say that,
Oh, I'm not sure that it is.
but it may not be. Yeah,
When I think decentralized fiat, I think Bitcoin.
yeah, but that's
Bitcoin's a
not
decentralized fiat.
uh, sure.
It's not backed by anything. Now, what it is backed by is the trust of the network, and which is no real different than the dollar, which is fundamentally backed by the trust of its usage network.
Right.
It's just not as well defined of a usage network.
Yeah, but I mean, correct. And I think that Bitcoin has a and I think other cryptocurrencies likely as well have use cases going forward. And part of that is going to be, I think, the digital economy. I just don't think that gold is going away as a store of value anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. There's some debate about
And
whether it is. I don't think so simply because it is a shiny,
it
durable metal.
right, and it makes sense that it should like I think it's if you look at the trend, it should be valued probably at least 5 times what it is.
Yeah, I mean, what market isn't being manipulated though?
Right. Silver has been manipulated for years.
Um,
Everybody knows.
but gold hasn't.
Right.
No, I
So
mean it's
there, well, a lot of it, like most people don't realize that most of the silver and gold trading that goes on is all paper trading. So
yeah.
like a lot of people buy silver or buy gold, they buy paper. It's just an IOU, and if that gets called due, there's not anything there to get it.
You hope that somebody can deliver on it, which, but they're just, it's the classic thing of when financial markets get the opportunity to trade paper and be shady, and then no one calls them on it because people just don't typically do that anymore, then it falls
Well,
apart.
eventually,
There's a lack of,
eventually they do.
well, yeah, but just a lack of, I forget what there's a lack of hygiene in financial markets. Like these good routines that keep things working properly, such as calling due on the paper goods that are supposed to be backed.
Sure. But there's
Um,
also, I mean, like, there's no good regulation to any of that stuff, like a good
sure.
quality third party outside organization. It's all, eventually, most of these things become corrupt at some point, and it doesn't matter whether it's an agency or if it's a government or whatever, because this stuff just happens. I mean, there was actually I can't remember who it was. There was a company here recently that was a gold and or silver storage facility so that you could buy gold or silver and literally instead of you taking possession of it and controlling it and having to worry about somebody breaking into your house and stealing it, there's like depositories around the
Ooh,
country that people that will do that for you. And somebody audited it and they found literal paper IOUs and empty vaults in some of the cases, and they got fined. Like, because what they were doing is they were double dipping and they were selling and trading and stuff that didn't belong to them, right? Like, you're not a
oh yeah,
bank. You can't just like do fractional reserve. Like,
this
it's
is
like, well, I
exact.
have 100 ounces of gold. I can loan out
I
97
mean,
of them.
I I don't even really care if they were fractional reserve, except for the fact that they're selling on the fact that they're not doing this and that this is a hard asset.
Right.
So, like, if they
So
wanted to create a fractional reserve gold system, fine.
so
But
remember, kids, not your keys, not your coins. And I don't care if that's gold or silver or Bitcoin or ETH or anything else. If you don't have custody of it, it doesn't actually belong to you. Ask all
yep,
the people that were invested in different coins, had bought coins, thought that they owned them. They were on a centralized exchange called FTX, and ask them how that worked out for them.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, but
If you
I do
don't
think
know
some
that
kind of
story,
crypto.
that went, they were giving that money, giving and or loaning and or investing that money into a company called Alameda Research, who happened to donate hundreds of millions of dollars to the Democratic Party, and somehow neither one of the heads of either of those companies went to jail. I don't know how that happens.
Well,
It's magical.
I mean, I still think that cryptographic technologies are the future for this sort of stuff because it's going to enforce good behavior. But speaking of corrupt leaders, we have a pedophile problem in our leadership.
I thought we knew that.
Well,
Oh,
some
you're not
people knew that.
speaking about just specifically the president.
No, no, I'm talking about like everything,
You did you
like
did you see the
everything.
recent video that came out
Which one?
of Biden sniffed somebody at an event and he
Oh.
thought she was trying to take a selfie and she was videoing?
So
He was like,
I
"Hey,
rec-
I want to tell you something, little girl. I'm gonna tell you a secret. Don't tell anybody."
is that what he said? Really?
Yes, that is what the man said. This is the president of our United States of America.
Oh boy. So So I just saw
I
Sound of Freedom
definitely,
very recently,
I definitely threw
and
up in my mouth a little bit.
yeah, well, if you want to throw up your mouth again, but in a good way, go
That
see
movie
Sound of
makes me
Freedom.
nervous.
It
It's
is
it is.
a it is
I
an
hear it's a
excellent
great movie.
movie. It is powerful, very powerful movie. I highly recommend you go see it. But after some of the performances from the pedophiles, the actors playing pedophiles, I should say, um, they do a very good job of playing pedophiles. The sniffing of kids hits different now. Like
Mm,
it. Mm, no, I'm trying not to avoid. I'm trying to avoid things that could be considered high felonies. But yeah, it is. It is. It hits different. Go see it. It is totally worth it if you they have the pay it forward program. So if you or your friends can't afford it, there are tickets that people have bought for you that you can go see. But go see that movie. Um, but yeah, it hits differently after seeing that. Like you feel it now. Um, and so so for those who don't know, Tim Ballard, he is the subject of the movie. Like he's this is based on a real story, and he's the big main guy.
it's the main character.
Yeah, well, but he's the main character, and he really exists. And he's been doing some interviews on this stuff, and he talks about how in the process of chasing down pedophiles, and you sort of see this a little bit in the movie. He researches them and he tries to understand their like a lot of these guys put out literature, put out writings, and so he has to read them. I mean,
I don't want to.
the guy is brave, but um, it's the you see these sort of same kind of ideas popping up all over, and he calls them the I think he called it I can't remember if he's referring to the doctrine of the pedophile narrative, or sorry, the doctrine of the pedophile network, or if it's a doctorate in the pedophile narrative that he was referring to about just learning these things. And according to him, he has found that they are all pushing the same kind of ideology. All of these pedophiles are pushing the same ideology.
Mhm.
They are pushing for um, I wrote it down. Let me pull it up. They're pushing the ideology is they want to separate parents from kids, sexualize kids, so make them turn them into sexualized entities. So
Mhm.
maybe that means having being discussing their gender a lot, or discussing sexual activities with them at a pretty young age, exposing them to pornography at a younger age. um, then there is removing God and religion from the picture. God and religion gets in the way of this stuff. It tells them this stuff is bad and wrong, and becomes an issue for these pedophiles. And then just increasing the general legal autonomy of kids. And this is all paraphrasing. This isn't how he.
Sure.
So this is some of my words that I'm using. This is how I understand what he was saying. And you can go watch the video. Jack Posobiec retweeted or reposted Lord Bebo on Twitter, where he's interviewed for this, but it's a some kind of press interview for Sound of Freedom. So if you want to find it, it shouldn't be too hard. But the last one is they're generally trying to increase the legal autonomy of kids. So
Mhm.
he talks about trying to push the narrative about children being able to consent, and focusing on how you get these kids to consent. Um, and he sees this everywhere when it comes to the gender ideology that's being pushed on children, and he leaves it with the tagline of what's more fluid than gender? Age.
Right.
And it's all of this gender ideology that's being pushed so heavily and so strongly from the highest levels of pretty much every major institution is all basically pedophile propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually a theory to this that you don't see as many pedophiles pushing their agenda and their narrative recently as like nearly as much as they used to, because they don't have to, because the LGBTQIA plus group is pushing the exact same narratives. And
Right.
so they're like, well, we can just sit back and let them push the narrative for us. We don't have to mess with it. We
One,
don't have to push forward. And if
but
you
to put it
look
another
at the
way,
history of the the gender theory stuff, the people who started it also at the time argued for the fluidity of age
pick
and
pick a
and
pick a
were
queer theorist, pick any queer
yes,
theorist, and they have defended or advocated for pedophilia.
correct.
And if you, so it's not so much that they're backed off because other people are doing it for them. I think they're just winning, basically. They have found a good channel to push this stuff
Well, what
because
I mean
all of
by
this,
that is that the pedophiles themselves, that people who are just pedophiles are no longer, you're not seeing a lot of them, the fact of them
defend
pushing that
pedophilia directly.
narrative
Right.
or pushing, yeah, or defending it because they don't have to, because there's this other group that's pushing the exact same ideology that has a much larger
It's
acceptance and
it's
is a
not even
protected group.
it's not even another group. It's the same people. It's the like if you look at a lot of these LGBTQI blah 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 people
Right.
out there, they were members of NAMBLA. They were leaders in NAMBLA. They were like they were in these pedophile circles.
Define NAMBLA for those who don't know.
Was it North American Man Boy Love Association?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it.
It's
I mean,
sickening and disgusting, but people need to know what that, when you
so
see that.
well, and we know with the well, we believe with the Epstein client list and the Maxwell client list that they had some very prominent, powerful people there.
No Epstein client list.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
no Maxwell client list. The only two people who ever got convicted of trafficking children to nobody.
Yeah, but we have pretty strong evidence that there was some high level people associated with them. So I'm
Like
not.
whom? Like Bill Gates
Yeah,
or
Bill Gates,
Clinton?
Clinton, like
Like
uh,
everybody who has
highly
everybody
powerful
who has
people in
gotten,
media.
yeah, everybody who's been outed for doing something, I like, in Hollywood or in any kind of power recently, that like got caught doing whatever, every one of their names, generally almost every one of their names has been on that client list.
Flight log because we don't have the
Or
client list.
flight logs, yes, flight
Yeah.
logs.
So, and we know the flight log. We're pretty sure the client list exists somewhere or existed. Maybe it's been destroyed. So
No,
we
you
know
don't
that
destroy
there
stuff like
is.
that.
Um,
You know who has the client list, right?
the FBI.
Yep, Pentagon, right?
Oh, the Pentagon. Okay. Yeah.
It's
Well,
it belongs to the deep state, right?
yes.
The
So
the intelligence community as at large.
my
You don't
point
get
is,
rid of, as long as your name's not on it, I guarantee you they don't get rid of that. It is somewhere. It may be in a glass box with a little hammer next to it that says break in case of emergency. But
maybe. I mean, if a high enough general in the Pentagon is on that list, he may make that list disappear. But
maybe.
I don't. I mean, there might be kryptonite to deep state. I don't know for sure, but what I do know from that, by the very fact that we believe that client list exists and it won't be released and there's prominent names on it, is that a lot of our leaders are pedophiles and are knowingly and directly defending like protecting pedophiles for pedophilia.
Yes.
So,
I feel like we've known that for a while.
well, you and I have known that for a
I feel
while.
like a lot of people have known that, whether they wanted to admit it or not, they've known that for a while.
Sure, I'm just laying out the proof here a little bit.
Yeah, we're just getting more and more of the proof available to us. And
So,
by the way, for anybody who's watching this who doesn't realize this, the movie The Sound of Freedom was actually made and produced like 4 or 5 years ago, but was never released.
yep,
In its first 5 days, I think, it made
it's
over
already made.
$40 million in box office revenues versus like I don't know what was the new Disney movie that came out. I don't remember what it was,
uh,
but
Indiana Jones, I think, but
Indiana Jones, yeah,
it's killing
and
Indiana Jones's
it's
per
on
theater revenue.
right because it's on half the number of screens that Indiana Jones is. Literally, July 4th, when they looked at the numbers, Indiana Jones brought in something like 10 million,
Hmm.
and The Sound of Freedom brought in 14 million, and it was only showing on like 3,600 screens, and Indiana Jones was on 7,200. Can you imagine the disparity that would be there if you had it on more screens? It's outrageous.
Yeah. Well, and it's
A
I
bigger
I
question
use.
is, why wasn't it released for 4 or 5 years? Like,
Well, you don't think there might be some pedophiles in Hollywood, do you?
no, I know there are.
Yeah,
I absolutely know there are.
I'm just
And
being facetious.
and
Come on, Sean, I'm doing
I
a
feel
bit.
I know. But I feel confident that they were probably not wanting to make sure that wanted to make sure that didn't get out into the world.
Well,
Like this is the reality.
my whole point is we are being led by pedophiles. A good portion of them are directly pedophiles, and then a good chunk of them are just doing the bidding of pedophiles without even looking too closely or caring.
It's pedophile adjacent.
Yeah, there's various degrees of pedophile adjacent, but there's like, for every direct pedophile, there's 5 people that are knowingly protecting a pedophile, and for every, that was weird. My camera messing up,
Yep. Yeah.
but no, my phone was hacked. They want to shut down the conversation.
Well, yeah. When you start talking about Epstein's client list, I mean,
Well, and how we're
what do you want
like,
to talk about next? The Nashville Tranifesto?
that actually sounds like not that big of news in comparison, but I
I
mean,
mean,
you just
but
had
it's
Joe
adjacent.
Biden. I mean, Joe Biden sniffing kids. You think his handlers don't know that he sniffs kids?
Absolutely, they know.
You don't think the kids have said something to a handler at some point? So they're all kind of knowingly protecting a pedophile because it furthers their political careers or prevents injury. Like,
I mean, look at the Disney executive that was assaulting children for years.
which one?
I don't even remember his name, but
No, I
he
mean, like,
was.
which one? Because I think there are
Oh,
multiple.
well,
Like,
I'm
how?
talking about there was one that was like in charge of like the Mickey Mouse Club or something.
I mean, there
He
was,
was like a director of
what's his
production or something.
name?
Like he was
Weinstein?
no, that's a
Weinstein?
different dude. Weinstein was the guy
Or
in Hollywood who
I thought he worked for Disney too, but
is the
yeah,
he is I would say probably the inspiration for people the meme of the casting couch.
yeah. From what I
Like
hear, it's
he
yes.
definitely took advantage of young, and I'm not even going to
Yeah.
say young girls. I'm going to say young people
Oh, yeah.
because
Yep.
I mean, who was it? Terry Crews? Terry Crews,
I
I
don't
think,
think it was about.
testified before Congress about the
Well, he may not have
uh,
done with Cruz, but there were
the
definitely some guys that.
degeneracy of Hollywood, and
Yes.
not necessarily specifically Weinstein, but just the
Oh, yes.
degeneracy of things that go on in Hollywood and what he was told to do
Why do you
in
think
order
Mel
to get
Gibson
some.
got canceled? Like, there's pretty strong evidence. Like, he was talking about some of the debauchery and degeneracy of it, and shortly afterwards, videos start to come out tanking his reputation, and like, you
Yeah,
could be they stopped protecting him or they put a hit piece. I mean, it's like, I mean, he had his own issues, sure, but other people have had issues that they've survived better. So
plenty of other ones have had much bigger issues and that have never come to light.
yes, oh yes, or that have and they've rebounded with help. But like it's my point is like what I just talked about is separating kids. That is the gender ideology that is the forefront of the Democrat Party.
Hmm.
So, without a doubt, the Democratic Party is being run by pedophiles.
They're not your kids, they're our kids. Don't you know that?
We are coming
That
for
was
your
Joe
children.
Biden. No, Joe
Right.
Biden said this, that you don't have the right to tell people what they should or what we should teach your kids because they're not your kids, they're our kids. So we're going to
Hmm.
teach them what they need to know, what they need to learn.
Right.
And then, yes, that we're coming for your children.
Right. Oh, we said that for a while. That doesn't make it better. That
No.
makes it a lot worse
Yeah.
because when you look at this stuff, it goes back decades. This has been in the works for multiple decades.
And
They
people
know
wonder
they're
why I say that my kids will never, ever, ever go to a public school. I don't care. I will teach them myself. I will homeschool them.
no. I mean, it is, and the myth that like, oh, you send them to a Catholic school, don't you afraid they're going to be abused by a priest? The rate of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church is so much lower, even using the highest numbers, the highest estimates, than so much lower than public school.
Oh, I'm sure.
So much lower. Now, if you think about it, it doesn't surprise you. If you were a predator and you wanted to have access to kids or you wanted to be abound little kids, what would you do? You'd find a way to work at a public school.
Well, how about this? I jokingly talk about whenever I'm like at the range or something or out hunting, we talk about like there's a target-rich environment, right? You don't go hunting
Right,
where there are no deer,
right.
right? So does it make more sense to go into the clergy where for the most part you're separated from children? You don't have a lot of access necessarily.
Right.
Or does it make more sense to become a public school educator where you get a new crop of young, impressionable children every year?
Yeah. I mean, it's like there
It's
is
sick
some.
when you think about it, but I mean, like, from a realistic standpoint, it makes sense.
I would say it's probably more likely that the priests that were abusing young boys initially went to the clergy to try to escape some of that those desires, but eventually succumbed and gave in to them. And
But I mean, I don't think
but
it matters. Like,
well, no, but I'm just saying it's more
maybe,
it given the like why would you join the clergy? Now maybe I'm missing some
but
patterns that they saw to
I
go
mean,
and to take advantage of that.
if you're not like part of the concern that I have with your argument there is that you're trying to lend some sort of reasoning to why they may have done that
I'm
versus
just
just if you just assume that they were if if you don't worry about who and what, you just say if you have a person who is a pedophile
right,
or is pedophile tendencies or whatever,
right.
does it make more sense to take choice A and go to clergy or B and go to public school?
Oh, ridiculously be. But that's kind of my
Right,
point. It is so the clergy's like that's your enemy. That's fighting against your pedophilic tendencies. It's kind of my point.
right.
Because that's
It
part of the doctrine of the pedophiles is that you got to
sure.
remove God. So
No, and that's what I'm saying.
maybe
Like I agree. Like that I think that's a second or whatever tier, you know, allegory. But if you look at it from like just straight outside, like where's there more opportunity for me, right? Like take that stuff out of it. Do the
oh
same.
yeah.
You can take the same thing and be like, okay, I live in rural Montana. My job options are cattle rancher and cattle rancher because it's all there is. So, like, do I stay here and be a cattle rancher? But I went to college and got a degree
Well, then you're
in
the cattle
physics.
rancher. You're the cattle
Does it
rancher where the cattle are the tourists.
right?
But
But do you do that or do you go to where people are doing, theoretical physics? You go to the place where if you get a degree in theoretical physics, you don't move to rural Montana. You move to someplace that's doing theoretical physics.
If you're a pedophile, you go find a suburban school that's not, it's maybe a little desperate for help, isn't going to look too closely, kind of
You know what's even
underfunded.
worse? Inner cities.
Well, that's my point. It's
Not even suburban, or I mean maybe some rural, but I would venture a guess you see a lot of it in cities. A lot of it in inner cities.
I mean, the ones I've heard from are the poorer suburbs, I'd say,
Okay, that
where
makes
it's like
sense.
there's the parents are it's safe enough that the parents trust the school.
Hmm.
It's they're not wealthy enough to be able to devote the resources to paying attention to their kids,
Hmm.
and so you're kind of left unmolested. I couldn't
I
think of
would
a
have
better
used
word.
the term unchecked.
I
Unchecked would have,
I couldn't
because
think of another
they
word.
really, yeah, ouch. Yeah, I mean, well, you see the same stats, I think, a lot in like daycares.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Anybody
I
who's
mean,
paying attention, like you shouldn't send your kids to a daycare. There was one that I saw, there was a video I saw just not too long ago in the last couple of weeks of a daycare worker who grabbed a little girl. She couldn't have been more than like, geez, 6 maybe, and like grabbed her by the hair and slung her around in a bathroom. Like, dude, there's hard surfaces everywhere. You could have
I think I know what video you're
killed
talking
her.
about. Oh
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I mean, and there was a
Th-
while,
There was
they make
another
some
one.
excuse and she just merely gets fired instead of
There was
thrown in
another
jail.
one a while back where two different individuals were watching the same classroom, and both of them assaulted kids in that classroom.
I mean,
Multiple children got assaulted in that classroom, and it
if
was just it was an after school, like it was a daycare. And it's
here's
like,
how you here's how you vet a daycare. If they don't allow you to put a camera in the room,
here's how it was
don't
on
go with them.
camera. They had a camera in the
No,
room.
no, but like your camera, put a webcam in your camera that you can access at any time and record. If they don't allow you
Here's
to do
a
that,
here's a better idea.
don't use daycare at all. Is that your answer? Because that's not really reasonable for most people.
Sure it is.
Okay, whatever. I know where this argument's going to go with you because
Why isn't it?
it's not a feasible. It is not financially feasible for them. They need to leave their kids somewhere, and they both need to work. Like it's just people get themselves in these situations. It sucks. They shouldn't, but they do anyways.
So I would argue that that's a choice that they made.
What's a choice that they made?
That they got themselves into that situation.
Okay,
And I think identifying it and realizing that what it is better than just saying, well, there's nothing that can be done about it. Like this is what it is, and move forward towards getting to where you don't have that problem.
oh, sure, but you're still going to need to vet daycares at least for a time. Like
Or
you're
reconnect with your
responsible for your
family.
kids. Like again, not everybody has that option. Some people's family are worse.
I know. Don't get
Um,
me wrong. Like there's no perfect answer to any of this. I'm
no,
just
but
saying, like, I think it's a better example for families to start reconnecting
yes,
in a
in
sense
general,
that
yes,
okay, well, you know, hey, grandma watches the kids while you're at work, right? And
sure.
you know,
Would you trust your parents to watch your kids?
would I trust my parents? No.
Okay, so and that's it's
I mean, but I also don't have to worry about that.
sure. And my point is that there are not everybody has made all the right choices and they have to suffer the consequences. And sometimes the consequences mean they have to go with daycare for a short period of time. So to dismiss the need to vet daycare is
Well, I'm not saying dismiss the need to vet daycare. let me rephrase. I think that if we did things better as a society, as a group, as people,
Yes.
that we would you would not need to vet daycares nearly as much because you wouldn't need them as
Oh,
much.
sure.
You'd have a half or a quarter of the number of daycares, which means you would weed a bunch of that stuff out because
Yes.
nobody's going to take their kids to a daycare that is assaulting their children,
Right. And you're
right?
going to like I mean, some of it is
And
just
if
every parent needs to be more vigilant and not just assume that the nice lady at the daycare is a nice lady and isn't just customer service facing you.
right,
Because that's like, here's the thing: retail customer. Think about the retail people out there that are so nice and helpful and sweet. They hate your guts. They don't want to be doing this, but that's their
yeah,
job is
but
to put on that air.
right, no, I got you. I agree, but
So
and
don't
also
trust these people,
the other
not
thing
implicitly.
the other thing is that we need to like I think we need to get back to having conversations between husbands and wives and understanding that like, look, I'll go work 3 jobs so that you can stay home with the kids.
Yes. Oh, I mean, it has to be. There has to be a lot more discussion about what is a what the options are, what is
Hmm.
important, and what is necessary when it comes to taking care of the kids.
Right.
There's way too many things. That, I think there's sort of a. It's almost treating kids as like advanced pets, where it's as long as we keep them alive, we're fine. And no,
They're accessories.
what do you think a pet is?
They're well, pets have become accessories to a certain extent too, but they're accessories. Like most, not most. There are a lot of people who the only thing they ever talk about and the only thing that they like they're talking about like their kids. Like it's and it's not because they're like just super proud of them. It's more of like, look at me, look at
It's
my
they're
thing.
being a
It's like
good
having
father or mother is a part of their identity.
it's like they bought a Birkin bag. Like, look at how much better I am than you. I
Yeah.
have this, or my
Look
child
at how
does that.
successful is my yeah. No, absolutely.
It,
It's
and
they're probably a intersection of pets and accessories. You're right. And it's I think that is
sickening. I'm sorry. What?
it,
That wasn't what you were saying.
I mean it's I need it barely registers on my sickening meter to be fair compared to the more recent
Well, based on
topics.
what you
But
just watched, yeah.
yeah, I mean it really adjusts your sickening level of things.
Well, you could argue that
But
that behavior is what leads to what you got to watch and witness.
it I don't know if I'd say it leads to that.
Really?
I don't
I can make that argument if you'd like. How many kids
no.
die in the back seat of cars every year because they got left in the middle of summer?
Yeah, but I mean that's
How do you disregard the health of your child and care about your child enough that you forget that they're back there?
no, I mean there's horrible things that result from it. Some that are arguably worse. But um
I'm just saying, like, it's a mindset and a theory. Like, if
oh,
you're of the person who has that mindset that your kid is an attachment or is a pet or whatever, you're the
your
same
kids are
type
more
of person.
vulnerable to certain types of predation, but I don't know it necessarily brings about the predation.
Not necessarily brings about the
Okay.
predation, but it what it does do is it puts it 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 sets them up to be in the worst possible position to be attacked by a predator.
Yeah, I guess it you can make an
It
argument that they're
it
enabling it a
creates
little
it
bit.
creates them to be prey, it molds them to be prey.
Yes. Yes.
Because a lot
I'd
of
agree
those
with that.
same things are like that's when you get, divorced families and kids that don't have a father role. Like one of the things who was it? There was a guy who did a really prominent interview back in like the 80s that he was a pedophile that did an interview and he was a former coach or something at a local school And he even stated, he was like, if they had a strong father in the home or in their lives at all, they wouldn't. He's like, I wouldn't even mess with it because it was just too dangerous. Like it just wasn't worthwhile.
Well, and it's one of those things that's it's hard to build the trust when people aren't as desperate for trust. So if you have a good father figure, then you have a
Right.
strong authority figure that you can trust. So you can tell them things. You can tell them secrets or bring up concerns or help work through problems. And
Right.
one, having done that, you're going to be a little bit wiser to things. And two, if your coach comes up to you and says something, you can mention it to your dad. But if your
Right.
dad's absent, if there's no father figure in the home, if you're kind of left to your own devices, you're just left to stew on that. And you being young and naive, which just goes with the territory of being young,
Right.
you're gonna and they're trusted by everybody else in the community.
Yeah.
You think,
Exactly.
oh, they're trusted by everyone. Well, they've been
That's my
vetted.
point. Yeah.
So, oh, absolutely. I mean, this is all part of separating kids from their parents,
Right.
breaking down the family structure. So this whole attack on parents, the
It's the destruction of the family unit.
oh yes, well, but it's like, and these parents caring about these child's education are extremists. Oh my God, that should raise all of the red flags.
It's amazing to
All of
me
the red flags.
how many people don't see that as a red flag
I,
at all. Like they just don't even. They're like, well, what's the big deal? Like they just want to make sure that your child gets taught properly.
uh,
Oh, that's so sweet that you are that naive.
like it's the thing you got to look for is they say these terms like properly. Who gets to define properly? And you think, what, well, it's the people in the Department of Education. What I'm telling you is those people are pedophiles. Maybe not all of them, but enough of them. The rest are just
Right.
naive and are helping the pedophiles. Some knowingly, a good chunk knowingly, some unknowingly, but they're helping pedophiles. So when you think about who's doing this properly, I want you to think about how pedophiles would define properly.
Yeah, I would argue that according to them, the people in charge, the Department of Education, etc., they are doing it properly. You're right. We are teaching your kids properly.
Yes,
I
but they're
mean, this is the
pedophiles
same thing
defining that term.
that and this is where I hope that we're winning, right? I think that I hope that our side is winning because of the things that I see going on with like the Sound of Freedom actually going to
If we're losing,
theaters where people can see it. And I mean, like the people that are pushing back on what was it? Who was it? Oh, Gavin Newsom the other day made a stopped by a bookstore to see the banned
banned
books,
books, but
but
if
they're
they're
not banned.
banned, how do
They're
you buy
right
them at a
here.
bookstore?
They're just not allowed in schools
They're
because depictions of people performing sexual acts on each other does not belong in an elementary, middle, junior high school, and you could even argue potentially at high school. It's none. I don't think that sex ed necessarily even needs to be taught in high school. I don't know if that's
yeah.
accurate. There's an argument that can be made either way,
I'm inclined to
but
think there's definitely some things that you should
that's
be teaching them, but we're not. I don't
that's
know.
something that right, but we're teaching them sex ed, but not finance.
Yeah, well, our school system's a joke.
I mean, like,
It's a
yeah,
competition. Like, what's
I
more
w-
of a joke, our school
that
system or our
I would
justice
trade
system?
off. Like, I would rather you trade off. Like, do a class in conspiracy theories. How about that? I'm okay with
actually,
that.
actually, making sense of conspiracy theories would be a fantastic class to teach your high school student.
Teach teach 2 semesters, right? So in high school, if I remember right, they well, I don't know if they do semesters now or well not or what, but in college, right, you have fall semester and spring semester. And so let's say in high school, one of the classes that you need to take is conspiracy theories 101 and 102.
Hmm.
And 101, it is just theories. What are current conspiracy theories? What's going on? How those and 102 is the conspiracy theories that are actually proven true.
Like making sense of looking. Some of it would be looking at conspiracy theories and their structure.
Mhm.
And then 102 would be like, here is how you evaluate conspiracy theories based on their likelihood of based on plausibility,
Yeah.
right?
And like
Basically sense making.
your end of project, like that would like you could do it in like sections where it's like, hey, we're going to discuss all the conspiracy theories of the government, or all the conspiracy theories that we can come up with or that we know or teach whatever. And then there's going to be a section of those that are, these are government conspiracy theories, and these are like, and here's all the conspiracy theories that were proven true. Okay. Now the thought process of understanding, how did they trick everybody? One. And two, how could you have learned to not be tricked by it in the process?
Yep. Yep.
Culminating in, what current conspiracy theories are going on, and how would you prove or disprove each one of them?
Yeah, I somehow do not see the Department of Education being
I know, but it
working,
sounds like
allowing that.
so much. Well, yeah, they're not going to teach you to be smart enough to
Right.
make
Like,
their
whoa,
own
whoa, whoa,
system.
whoa. We're not going to help you be like, yeah, that we can't trick you. That's not what we want.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, the education needs to change in so many ways. Like it is
Speaking of which,
scary.
um, Jack Posobiec was trolling people the other day, hardcore,
You're gonna
more
have to be
so
more
than,
specific.
yeah, more so than normal. Um, well, as it relates to government conspiracy theories,
Okay.
did you know that there is a national park in the U.S. that you can go to and find gemstones naturally? You can keep whatever you find.
I think I know where this is going. Is it
Google Ruby Ridge to find out more.
yes. Yes.
And I mean, like, had one for Operation Northwoods,
I've seen the one for Mockingbird.
Mockingbird.
Yep.
Yeah, like boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were several of them that came out that day, and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. I love it. I love it. Could you
Yeah.
imagine
There's
working at NSA and being like, why have the Google search analytics skyrocketed for Ruby Ridge, Operation Northwoods, and Project Mockingbird? This doesn't make any sense. Too many people. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're like expecting it. I'm pretty sure they have Posobiec tailed. Like I think they assign an agent to him. They have to rotate him out frequently because he starts asking all the wrong questions. But hazard of the job.
Poso converts too many.
It's like so
Like
so
I'm
boss,
not
what
saying
is
like, I'm not
Project
saying that he's
Northwoods?
like right, but I'm not saying he's wrong either.
Well, I just like so what is
Well, we
Project
have to
Northwoods?
reassign you. You're moving to Alaska.
It's just like day one. So what is Project Northwoods? What? No, I'm just asking. Am I allowed to? It's day one. This is my first day here. Am I not? Oh,
No. Go ahead and
different desk. Okay.
put your headset on the table, and security will be by to escort you out in just a moment.
So why don't you take the week to just
We're
take the
no,
week?
no, no, no.
We'll
You're
resign
getting
them.
relocated to Alaska, and don't worry, your plane's waiting outside.
They just have one
Well,
ready on the tarmac.
I need to go get some stuff. No, no, we'll have all of your stuff packed up and shipped to you. It's not a problem.
How
You're
many
good.
jobs do they have in Alaska? Because I feel like they might be running out at some point. But
They actually that's part of what they actually do to people who
oh, I
don't
know.
toe the line.
You see
I've
it
known plenty of
in
people that were
State
inside the.
Department.
Mm,
Yep, yep. Bad postings.
yeah.
Bad postings.
How did
But
you get Alaska? Don't ask. Oh, haha. One of
I
those,
I
huh?
mean
Yep.
I mean it does seem problematic putting all of them in a single spot, but no,
Well,
I
I
mean
don't
I
know if
just
they do, but they have plenty of postings all over the place.
yeah. Uh
You see somebody who is like doing really well, and then all of a sudden they get reassigned to like as an ambassador to Belarus or something for like, or Lithuania, Serbia, something. They just like why? That doesn't make any. Oh, he pissed somebody off. I got you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's one of the ways you know when it's a purely political organization that they don't care about competency at all. I mean, part of it is well, you see them go after the January 6th protesters, right? I mean, they're finding people in random backwoods Alaskan towns, and sometimes they're the
But
right person, sometimes they're not.
wait. Let's be clear about this too, because they can find those people across the country, and
Mm-hmm.
there
In
are
a matter of
people who are
months.
still in jail, have been in jail for 2 years, which
Mm-hmm.
is longer than the sentence they would get if they were convicted,
Yep. Some without charge or
and
trial.
all of them without trial,
Yep.
still waiting on their speedy process.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, nobody seems to be able to identify the people who put the bombs in front of the two parties' like respective headquarters.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. Like, I'm not stupid.
Well,
Oh,
but I mean,
and we can't figure out whose cocaine it was in the White House.
well,
You're
but I
telling
mean,
like January 6th. How about this? January 6th is a great example. How many? What did they say? There was like 40,000 hours of video footage at one time. I think they said somebody
yeah,
quoted that
yeah, yeah.
number. Okay, how long did that go on?
Did
4 hours?
I thought it was like three tops,
Say
but
it's four because it's an even round number.
okay, yeah.
So if it took 4 hours, how many cameras do they have to have 40,000 hours of video?
10,000 cameras. I mean,
And that's
some of it's cell phone footage that they confiscated.
that they weren't releasing.
Oh yeah, I mean they're not really they're
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
that seems odd that you would not release the cell phone footage, but still, okay.
well if it shows one of your federal agents in the crowd doing stuff.
Or
Yeah, of course.
shooting somebody in the throat and then getting praised for it. I mean, definitely didn't wait, that
Oh,
did happen. That did happen. I forgot.
yeah, but we saw that because
Yeah.
we saw it live. Um yeah, that was
But
not a
still, I
good
mean,
shoot.
how many okay, so what, maybe there were a
But
thousand cameras in the crowd? And how about this? Your phone can't video for 4 hours.
no, but
The
if you
crowd wasn't
have
that large.
yeah, I mean there's a lot of cameras on there. There's a lot like yes, I'm not sure what your point is. We know that they're covering it up. My
I'm just
point
saying,
is
like,
like
trying to figure out how many cameras there are there. How many more cameras do you, like, that's just a Capitol building. How many more cameras do you think there are in the White House?
apparently none around the Situation Room.
I
uh
mean, that's an argument one can make, but I
no,
I
I'm
don't
not my
believe
whole point of
that.
all of this is like they have deployed massive resources to fight their political enemies.
Sure.
But when you find people doing but when it comes to trying to stop horrible people doing horrible things to children, horrible people doing horrible things to children,
Yeah.
no, I don't know. I
I don't know
just
if we have
like
the
that's a
money
lot
to
of
do that,
work. That's we don't have the resources. That'd be really really expensive. Like it's
but
like
we can
it'd be
send billions
so
of dollars to
hard.
Ukraine.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. To protect Joe Biden's assets
Right.
because Burisma has a lot of holdings in areas that are occupied by Russia.
Yeah, they're probably not getting those back.
No, no, probably not. Um,
Whoops. So much for the
yeah.
10% for the big guy.
Well, he still got his 10%, but you know, it's not the next 10% he's going to get.
Yeah,
Like it. I mean, that's
he got
the
part of it.
we are run by corrupt pedophiles.
Mhm.
These are people
Absolutely.
that want to do terrible things, and if you want to understand what they want to do to your children, see Sound of Freedom. It will you'll get it. in a way you didn't, and
I
it's
hope I hope you I hope for our sake as a country that you get it.
it is if you have children, it's essential that you get it.
Yes, absolutely.
Like you
You
if
need
you
to
have
understand
children or you
this.
want to have children, go see Sound of Freedom. You need
That's a
to understand the danger.
I was going to say that's a better if you have children or plan to have children.
Like
You'd
it just
like to have children, then
it, it
yes, you absolutely need to be aware.
it'll give you an understanding of how it works, and you need to know. But sorry to end
On
on
that
such a
note,
somber note.
uh, unfortunately,
Thanks.
the world is not always sunshine and roses.
I wish it was slightly more, just 20%. But no, it's been a bit of a darker episode, I suppose. But thanks, guys, for watching. Leave a comment below if there's any feedback for us. As always, like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. I hope you find these topics important as we do.